Thanks for the stream, thanks for the download, thank you for tuning in to episode 150 of Coming Up Next, the podcast. And if you want to support the show, you can go to comingupnext.com.au where you can find links to Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, where you can subscribe to the show, and the next 150 episodes will automatically be downloaded for you, which is very convenient if you were to be asking me. You can also find the previous 149 episodes of the show there for your streaming convenience. A big thank you to Emma Lawton for coming on the show last week and sharing her story about getting Parkinson's disease diagnosis at the age of 29, and about how she's managed to turn that into something tremendously positive with 365s.com, and that campaign is still running. So if you want to go to 365s, which is all words with an S at the end.com, you can find out more information there. Corrie Chen is my guest this week. She is a film and television director, predominantly working in the television space at the moment. Last year she had a breakout year, directing blocks for Mustangs FC, Sisters, and most recently Homecoming Queens, which is available on SBS On Demand. She's an incredible director with quite a remarkable story. So without further rambling, let's get into it. Episode 150 of Coming Up Next, the podcast, with Corrie Chen. I went on SBS On Demand last night and watched the first episode of Homecoming Queens.
Yeah, great.
It's a tremendous show. Really,
yeah,
I really enjoyed it. One of the things that I sort of noticed when I was looking over your body of work is how kind of personal you tend to make everything. And I guess I wondered how important that is for you as a creative, as a filmmaker, to not be reaching for kind of other, bigger ideas, or that's the wrong kind of phrasing, but like it doesn't seem like you're giving you're making something for an audience. It feels like you're making stuff that is important to you.
Yeah, that's interesting because I guess I've never thought about it like that, but it makes complete sense hearing someone say that back to me. And I think I went to VCA, and part of the training from the get-go was for better or worse, write what you know. And that sentiment has really stayed with me, even if I'm not writing the scripts, which a lot of the time I'm working with a writer. But it's so I think so much of the storytelling I'm interested in, it's about a feeling. So for me, my job as a director should be the bridge between the intention of words on a page and what the audience is experiencing, and that is creating that emotion. So, and on the second part to that is, whether I like it or not, the personal is political, and given the conversation that's going on at the moment with diversity and inclusion, I can't help but put something that I'm really passionate in across my work.
Yeah, it's a remarkable time in, I think, film and I guess on a global scale as well, in terms of this paradigm shift that's happening with diversity and inclusion for all people. And I suppose, I've been following you on Twitter for some time, and you've been a massive advocate for this shift for a while. I guess, what's it been like for you over the last couple of years to be someone within that shift?
Yeah, I I feel extremely lucky to exist in this time because, I always sit down and go, gee, if this is the early 90s or the 80s or whatever, someone like me would not have these opportunities to have my voice heard. But, like my earlier, like all my first shorts actually were about the immigrant experience. And I never consciously sat down and went, I'm going to talk about the immigrant experience because of diversity and the importance of it. I just, again, it came from a place where I wanted to really express something that I knew to be true. And I knew to be different to all the other shorts that were getting made at VCA at the time. So, yeah, it wasn't a strategic move by any stretch of the imagination. And then, because it was coming from such a personal and passionate place, it was something that I really wanted to develop as part of my authorial voice as well. And the rest of the world, it all sort of exploded, and I happened to have been around, I think, and really experienced the positives of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is hard though, because I think, as all creatives go, you do suffer the imposter syndrome, like how much of this is because I'm good and how much of it is just because it's right place, right time. And I have noticed stuff like whenever there's an article about diversity, they'll just randomly use a photo of me for no reason other than that, oh, well, here's something, let's just slap this photo in, which can be really frustrating because I don't feel like I'm spoken about enough because of my work. It's more for what I stand for, which is fine in its own right, but
you feel as though the pendulum's swinging in the wrong way. It's not kind of...
I think it's just frustrating because when I'm used as a poster child for diversity, and I'm not in control of that narrative, that scares me a bit because I don't know where that can go, because just the internet moves so quickly, and I occasionally get some trolls as well. Very, very, it's not a serious thing, but stuff like that makes me go, I feel like I should be the only one that's able to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a feeling like we're demonstrating, not you, I mean, but like whoever the publication is going, we're demonstrating that we're diverse. Here's diversity, and this is what it looks like, as opposed to it being a genuine, like, let's just demonstrate, like, let's just put the idea into practice, as opposed to showing it off.
Yeah, rather, it's never talking about the consequences, i.e. the works produced. It's, always talking about diversity. Yeah, as a theoretical thing still. And that is frustrating.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah.
So you were born in Taiwan, and how old were you when you moved to Melbourne?
About 9.5 or 10 years old. We lived in Sydney first, my parents and I, and then eventually down to Melbourne, for work reasons for them. But I was about 9 or 10. Right. And couldn't speak English.
Oh, wow, that must have been challenging.
Yeah, it really was. I think, credit to my parents. When I think back on that time, I largely remember it as being a warm, happy time. But now that I'm older, I kind of really pick at it, and I just think, geez, it would have been so hard for my mum as well, because she couldn't speak English and had left all her friends and family. And, and obviously me, and I couldn't, because of visa reasons, I couldn't go to school for a couple of years. All so right. I was more or less homeschooled by television, and learned English that way. Yeah.
Right. And do you have any memories of living in Taiwan?
I do. It's, pretty foggy. And a lot of the time I kind of go, I don't know if they're real memories or memories I've created in my mind through stories my parents are telling me. But I've been back only twice in like the 20 years I've been here. And every time I go, more stuff comes flooding back to me that feels a bit more authentic than what I think are my memories.
Yeah. There's something quite, I guess, tactile about being in the space and like your other senses, I guess, being stimulated.
Yeah, it's just the details of it that makes me realize the difference between what's real and what's not. Like, I feel like I'll remember the feeling of a certain fabric or a smell as opposed to what happened in that scene.
Did you kind of get tickled by the filmmaking bug? Was that something that you can remember through your childhood, or was it something that came to you a bit later?
It was actually my dad's suggestion, which he regretted later on.
What did your dad do?
My parents are entrepreneurs, so they do a little bit of everything. It's a very classic immigrant. But at the time, they sold computers, and this was in the mid-90s. But because I was struggling to make friends, and it was like one of my first sleepover parties. I was going to have some people around, and they got a bit enthusiastic, and my dad had an old video camera at the time, and he was like, oh, well, I think it was actually for my 12th or 13th birthday. And he was like, well, you can have this now, and maybe you can, like, film some stuff of your friends. So one of the first things I made, it was at that sleepover, and it was a remake, an attempted shot-by-shot remake of the opening of Scream. It's awful. It's not at all a shot-by-shot remake. And it was all, like, because I didn't understand filmmaking, it was all edited in camera. So, like, in mid-action, I'd get all my friends to freeze, and I'd change the camera angle and keep recording and freeze. And, yeah, it's very, very lo-fi. But it kind of kicked in from there. So every sleepover, it would be a thing that we'd do a music video or a little scene from something. And, yeah, it just hung around. I couldn't shake it. Yeah,
right. And were you ever in front of the camera, or you were always... No?
No, I'm awful in front of the camera. I think that was also partly why I was so interested, because I knew I would definitely be behind the camera and in control of how things were remembered. But yeah, I am so bad at taking direction in front of the camera. Right. And I'm always, even now, like, for any publicity stuff, I'm always staring down the barrel and, like, deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for actors because of that.
So you were doing these shorts remakes, music videos.
Yeah.
And were your parents encouraging of you, kind of, when you were getting towards the end of your high school and you were like, maybe I'll go and study this properly?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. They were alarmed, and they were basically like, cool, that's great. So how about you do law then? But it never felt real. I knew I loved it, but I had no idea what it meant. I remember going to the VCA open day when I was 18, back in 2004 or something. And at the time, they didn't take 18-year-olds either. So it just didn't feel like a solution. So I think after high school, I went and did a year of an arts commerce degree or something, got terribly depressed, and my parents saw that and was like, well, go and do what you want. But I still didn't have the belief or guts to think that this was a real career, so I went and did a media degree instead. Yeah. Right.
Kind of dipped your toe in, but didn't put the whole foot in.
Yeah, right. Definitely. But yeah, I made a short there. It was at RMIT, and the tutor, like the part-time tutor at the time, said you should try and apply for VCA with this short. I think you'd get in. And I did. And
wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And what was the process like? At that point, I guess you kind of understood that you didn't have to edit stuff in camera anymore.
Yeah, well, actually, by the end of high school, like non-linear editing kicked in, and I was able to
some Final Cut.
Yeah, a bit of Final Cut, a bit of mini DV action.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was really professional.
I've still got a box of mini DV tapes that I need to dump from about 2008.
Yeah, I have a lot. I want to try and transfer it before it becomes obsolete, I think.
Yeah, we might be a little bit late for that.
Damn. So many memories.
Yeah. Trying to track down one of those decks. Like, you would think that people would just be giving them away.
Yeah.
But they're so expensive.
Yeah.
Like $400 to $600 for one.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So what was the process then, I guess, for you of making this first short film when you were doing this media course?
It was a final year grad project, and it was, media degrees. It's kind of like whatever you make of it is fine. So we had an option of doing like a 5 to 10 minute short. And RMIT had a really, really old Super 16 camera that still worked, and it feels incredible now thinking about shooting on film, but somehow we
in a
kind
media
of
degree as well.
But we just cobbled together a few $1,000s to buy some stock and learn how to load a film canister, and just kind of went off and shot something. And I made this sci-fi that was about a Chinese couple. It was as the citizenship test was kicking in Australia, so it was sort of a play on that, where the idea of assimilation is really taken to a darker, more heightened place.
Right.
Yeah, but it was like a dark comedy sci-fi, very, very, very guerrilla and lo-fi. Like, I don't want anyone to see that film ever. Yeah, it's not online. It's just, I think I have a DVD somewhere.
It's on a mini DV tape.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that was what I applied to VCA with, and got in.
I actually read on your website that you wanted to be an astronaut before you got into filmmaking.
That's right.
I guess that your sci-fi film stemmed from...
Yeah, I really wanted to either an astronaut or an astronomer for most of my childhood, right before filmmaking. Yeah, but my dad was just like, you can't do that. There are no female astronauts. But then handed me a camera instead. So, yeah. I would still love to go into space. The idea of I just want to experience having no gravity. I think that's something you can do on Earth. Actually, I'm pretty sure there are services for that.
Yeah, it's gone a roller coaster.
Yeah, but yeah, that's something that I'm very interested in.
Yeah, I interviewed an astronaut actually, maybe about 6 months ago, and listening to the way that he would describe, like, watching the kind of mechanics of a day, like of Earth, like an Earth day, and he said something like the sun rises and sets every 90 minutes.
Wow.
From outer space. I'm like, it just completely blows the concept of time to pieces.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So you got into VCA. This was the Masters.
I kind of got into VCA in a weird way, in that by the time I thought to apply, I had missed all their Masters and grad certificate cutoffs. The only thing that was available was the honours year for an undergrad. And I was like, oh, I'll just apply for that. And by the time I got to the interview, they were all like, no one from the outside has ever applied for this. Like, you're not allowed to do this. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, on the website, it said that you just had to have an undergrad. It didn't say that you had to be from VCA. Anyway, they were really suspicious, really standoffish in my interview. So I kind of walked away going, well, I won't get in. But yeah, so then I got in, and it was the first time they had taken someone from outside of the school. But since then, it kind of triggered a thing where they allowed people to just kind of step in and do the honours year without having been there.
Oh, you made a change.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, fairly bureaucratic system.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
pretty cool.
So yeah, I did that, and then I did a year of masters. So yeah, I spent 2 years at VCA.
Yeah, and you finished around sort of 2012, 2011?
Yeah, 2011. Yeah.
Right, and I saw your short "Happy Country."
Oh yeah.
And actually, just listening to what you were saying before, I guess about when you first moved to Australia from Taiwan, and you couldn't speak English, and your mum couldn't speak English.
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of story is embedded in Happy Country.
Yeah. So yeah, Happy Country was my first VCA short, and that road trip was very largely or heavily inspired by my parents, because when we moved from Sydney to Melbourne, it was cramming every single thing we owned into a station wagon and driving down. And in my mind, that trip took weeks just because I was a child and time moved very slowly then. Yeah, and in the original versions of the script, there was a kid character sort of observing this whole incident. But yeah, it was definitely largely based in conversations between my parents.
And through making that short, do you still collaborate with some of the people that you worked with on that? I know that, a lot of people who I've spoken to on the show have who've been to film school have often sort of cited the people that they met as the most important or significant part of actually going to film school instead of just going out and trying to get a job.
Yeah.
Was that the case for you in terms of starting that collaborative relationship?
Yeah, not on my first VCA short, but on my second one, my master's short, Wonder Boy, the DOP on that, Michael Latham, is someone that I've shot heaps of stuff with. And for example, he shot Homecoming Queens and quite a few of my other shorts as well. And I had met Michael at VCA at the same time because he was doing his undergrad. And I completely agree. Part of film school is finding your tribe and who you click with. Yeah.
Actually, I saw that you went with Michael to shoot Tinseltown.
Yes, that's right.
That must have been quite a trip.
Yeah, that was insane. That was me trying to turn my life. I went through a midlife crisis in my career, in that I just didn't understand the point of filmmaking anymore.
Yeah. How long ago was this?
Like 2015.
Right, so only a few years ago.
Yeah. I just kind of went, it just became all about ticking boxes, and you get this money, and then you do, like, rather than what is it that I want to say, I felt like I'd forgotten about that for a little bit. So I kind of went, I saw this article about Christmas factories in China, and it just kind of gave me an excitement that I hadn't felt in quite a while, and I just thought, okay, well, let's just go and see what happens. And luckily
you went with Michael and
Michael's a camera. As crazy and as much of a nomad as I am, and agreed, and we just kind of set off and had some crazy times.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
How long were you there for?
About a month.
Right.
Yeah, so I went earlier by myself to just kind of suss things out. I was probably there for about a week and a half. And there were times during that week when I went, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I'm just in these factories with strange men, and they're like taking me up an escalator. And I just hit me and went, I have not told anyone where I am today. I could just disappear right now and no one would know. But I kind of fed all of that back into the film, and it was really an exploration of a world.
And once you'd shot Tinseltown with Michael, what was the post sort of did you have an idea of what it was going to be before you started shooting it, or did it kind of...
Yeah, I so after like a week and a half of scouting and, you know, trying to figure out if it was if we were able to get access into the factories and what were the limitations of the shoot, I did write a very, very simple script of it was meant to be like a Kafkaesque thing of a woman making her way up a factory, different floors of a factory, trying to find this man that doesn't exist. And so once we had that, we had to go about street casting and blending in and filming without permission a lot of the time, or filming with certain permissions that were based on, I don't want to say lies, but based on a version of the truth.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, I came back from that trip feeling incredibly stressed but alive. In a way that I just hadn't felt that excited and challenged in a long time. And the post took a little while just because it was all based on favors and people who were interested in either working with me or the project. But yeah, once I think a earlier cut of it was accepted into MIF, and once that we had that deadline, it all happened fairly quickly.
Yeah. A lot of your films have sort of done big festival runs. I guess how, because, you know, there's this whole sort of idea of having a strategy when one does a short film or any sort of project, I guess, that's independently done, of having a strategy of how you're going to release it or get it out into the world. Is that something that you've sort of abided to, or are you more interested in just getting as many eyes, I guess, initially, and then obviously as you've developed your body of work, the festivals that have accepted your work have gotten higher and higher, I imagine?
Yeah, I mean, I came from an era where short films were sort of your only option as a emerging filmmaker, and especially at VCA, they were like, you make a short, you get into Sundance, you make your feature. Like, that was the only
That's the
path.
formula.
Yeah. Which I was always like, yeah, but so how do I pay rent in the meantime? And it never felt like a realistic or tangible path to me, and I wasn't even sure if that was the dream that I wanted either.
How were you paying rent, out of curiosity?
Oh, not very well. I had a string of jobs in hospitality for a really, really long time. I worked for my parents, which was, it was convenient in that it meant that I could dictate my own schedule. Yeah, but emotionally it was awful because like they did not respect this career choice in any way.
Are they still selling computers?
No. So by that time they had a couple of restaurants, so I worked in some of them, and but I mean, like, it did mean that because I could work part-time there, I had a lot of little jobs in the industry as well, like note-taking in TV development rooms, and yeah, I was able to get little bits of grant money for various things.
So you saw like that there was a bigger picture, so you're just like, I'll just suck it up and work, earning some money with my folks.
Yeah.
But that's going to give me the flexibility to continue to pursue.
Yeah. Well, to me, I've never wanted to. I only like doing things when I feel really ready.
Yeah.
Like, I need to be extremely prepared. Like, even when I buy a new camera online, I need to watch all the unboxings on YouTube so I know what the experience is like before I buy it. Yeah, so the VCA path, I was like, I just don't want to do one short and make my feature. I don't want to be making stupid, like, rookie mistakes on my feature like that. So in my mind, I always wanted to make more shorts and do television and practice things, before the first feature. And so my midterm goal was to make television and get into that. And at the time, like in 2011, TV was like not that cool in Australia, especially. No one wanted to do it. So it was still like something that I felt a little bit embarrassed by when I said I wanted to do it. But yeah, I kind of really focused on it and tried to meet producers and get into those companies.
But you didn't feel like you were having very much luck?
No. I remember the year after I finished VCA, I was lucky enough to get an agent based on my student shorts. And at the time, she was like, well, for someone like you, normally in Australia, it takes 5 years to get your first job. And I was just like, oh my God, 5 years? No,
Yeah.
I'm going to do it in a short amount of time. She was right. I mean, actually, no, she was wrong. It took longer than 5 years. I think it took 6.
Right.
To get my first actual directing job. But yeah, I did so many attachments and still made my own shorts along the way just to really make sure I felt ready.
Yeah. And then 2017, I guess, last year was a pretty big breakout year for you in terms of actually starting to work in television.
Yeah, so it really was one of those scenes where it feels like a bit of an overnight success, but it just took 6 years to get there.
Yeah.
But I think because I had done so many attachments and assisting roles, when the floodgates opened, it all lined up very quickly, and it was easy for people to believe that I was going to be fine and ready. But that first job on Mustangs took forever to get.
Yeah. And I suppose people in the industry already know you because you've been around, you've been doing attachments or small jobs here and there.
Yeah. And from my understanding, when they were asking around for directors on Mustangs, it was just so many different people who knew me through my attachments and whatnot who had said my name, so that it just became like, I guess, an irresistible
proposition.
Yeah.
What was the process like of getting that job? Did you just get a phone call and they were like, do you want to do this job, or was it a bit longer than that?
I had heard about the project in 2016. I can't remember how, but and someone was like, this feels like a perfect show for you to be on. But I was really defeated by that time. I just didn't think it was going to happen. So I was like, yeah, as if. But I was in China again. I was doing research. I had gotten some script money to do research on this feature I'm writing at the moment. And I was in Inner Mongolia when an email came through, which was like, hi, I'm the producer of Mustangs. Do you want to have a chat about you directing a block? And because China with Gmail and stuff, it was very hard to, and even Skype is very scratchy at the time. So we had this terribly awkward Skype interview where I couldn't tell if they actually understood anything I was saying because it was so jarry. and I also had terrible food poisoning.
Oh.
At the time. Yeah. So I was like, but I didn't want to cancel the interview. So I was like covered in sweat, but like trying to not have my voice shake. I think they must have just thought I was really nervous or something, but I was actually just very, very sick.
Yeah. And so, and from there they offered you.
Yeah. So after that interview, they sent me some scripts to read, and that was when my agent was like, "Oh yeah, this is a good sign." I actually just wanted someone to say, "Great, you're hired." Like that was, and that never ever came. So I was always kind of like, "So, is this like, are we on?" And yeah, I think it took another 3 months for it to feel legit. Even though I now understand the process is that no one ever says, you got it. It's just
You're hired, lady.
Yeah.
What was the first day on set for you, or, the first episode? I suppose even the whole block, I could imagine, would have been a fairly anxiety-inducing experience.
Yeah.
When you're sort of stepping from, I'm working on my own project. The pressure is only from myself and from the people that I've brought in, to suddenly, you've got producers and networks and whatnot wanting you to deliver a product.
Yeah, and you're really slotting into a show that, because I'm so used to having spent years or at least, months on an idea and feeling like I'm part of the DNA of the world. But to suddenly kind of come in and still have the bravado of giving notes and saying, no, this is, how we could make it better and stuff. I was really, really nervous. And I also felt like the new kid at school as well, because everyone had, they've worked it with each other on other shows before. But I feel really lucky because that really was the perfect first show for me. Everyone was very welcoming and warm. The first day I remember being extremely nervous, and I'm pretty sure I was really pale because all the blood had drained from my face because everyone kept asking if I was okay at breakfast. And I think people were starting to be like, oh, is she going to have a nervous breakdown? But as soon as I started, it just felt like, oh, cool, I know what I'm doing. Everything's going to be really fine.
Yeah.
And we ended up finishing like half an hour early, which is always good.
Absolutely.
Everyone's happy, no overtime. Yeah. So I had a lot of fun.
How did you reconcile with yourself those sort of feelings and get over the idea of, you said that you had like some ideas for things that you felt could have been better. I could imagine that the temptation could be to just go, no, they know what they're doing, or no, it's not my place. But to actually go in there and go, no, I'm the director and these are the things that I think could improve the show.
I think I can't handle not saying my opinion. It often gets me into trouble. My agent's always like, I think you need to do some media training. But
dial back on the Twitter a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what I did was I was just a lot more, I tiptoed around what I really wanted to say, or it took me a lot longer to say it. And once I felt comfortable in that they weren't going to, judge me for my ideas, or that I wasn't going to get fired immediately, I just kind of let loose. And it's fine. I'm still around. Yeah. Still getting hired.
I suppose it's kind of like, what's the intention? Because your intention is obviously a collaborative one and to make a better product, as opposed to just kind of throwing your weight around or like trying to have an opinion for the sake of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, in that a lot of the time I'm just trying to understand what the motivation is. So it's not so much that it's not working. I always approach it like, what am I not understanding here? Which is it's a better way of inviting someone into your ideas.
Mm. So once you directed this block, it was 3 episodes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been very exciting when it actually went to air to see something that you directed on TV.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I love about television, is how fast-paced it is, in that within the space of a year, you could have made 5 hours of something that everyone can enjoy as a community at a certain time, as opposed to 5 years for 90 minutes. And I remember because a few years ago I did ABC doco, and I remember what that felt like when it trended on Twitter and stuff, just that sense of community enjoying what your intention was. So that was incredibly exciting.
That was the doco, that was Suicide and Me.
Yes, that's right.
How important do you think it is that you had, because your body of work kind of varies from drama to comedy through to documentary and sort of, I guess, cause-related documentary. To have all that experience under your belt to then walk into network TV as a director, do you think that diversity and that, the ability to kind of oscillate between those varying styles helped your voice and your style as a director?
it definitely doesn't hinder it because, like, I look at a lot of the directors I admire, like, like someone like Ang Lee, whose body of work does, he started doing sort of immigrant comedies, and has done The Hulk and, Brokeback Mountain and stuff. It's a huge scale of emotions across everything he's directed. And that's something that I've always looked to as an example, because in the end, it's just what I'm ultimately interested in is to make someone feel something, anything, and the genre almost doesn't matter. I did the doco because it was a way of getting something made, and I wanted to. I'm always interested in doing things that I'm not comfortable with, and I was not comfortable making a documentary. It was incredibly hard, but I walked away learning something about the structure of storytelling that I haven't been able to replicate in anything I've made since. And I always think about documentary as like, oh, I should really do that again. It's just about furthering storytelling skills.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I ask is I watched, there was this Spielberg documentary on a flight that I was on, which I think it's an HBO doc, and one of the points was like, it was 93, I think, or 94, Spielberg made both Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. And you just kind of go, wow, I mean, those are like two masterful films.
Yeah.
And I couldn't think of a director in today's sort of day and age, with the exception of maybe like if Scorsese released The Irishman and then a documentary about like Keith Richards or something at the same time. But it's like we get so kind of pigeonholed into like, this is what you are and this is how you fit into the industry. This is your kind of, that's your spot. And this is your space and this is what you do. But to kind of have a great sort of slate or repertoire, I think, is very valuable.
Yeah, and absolutely, that was something that I've always, I guess I haven't been consciously trying to replicate, but I know that in my own tastes, for example, at film school, everyone was like, that's the Wes Anderson guy, that's the Scorsese guy. And I think to me, people were like, are you the Wong Kar-wai girl?
All right.
And I'm like, no. Is that the only Asian filmmaker you can name?
Yeah.
But yeah, I always found it really hard to kind of go, oh, these are my influences, and that's it. Just because I, am so wildly expansive in what I like to watch. And I think that's now been, really replicated in what I'm making.
And continuing into your 2017, you also directed Sisters and Homecoming Queens, which is a show that you had written as well.
No, it's a show that I developed. So I executive produced it. Yeah. So I worked with Michelle Law, who's someone I've worked with before, and another writer, and I was on board it even before a word had been written. So I was like really in the heart of the world, which is something that I always appreciate. And that took about 2 years from inception to execution.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you feel like the time was right because you were sort of coming off the back of a couple of high profile TV gigs in Mustangs and Sisters, that was sort of the right time to be executing this project, or was it just coincidence?
A little bit of both, in that all the financing sort of lined up timeline wise. It happened to have been on the back of Sisters. No, actually, we had to push the shoot for Homecoming Queens back because I was hired on Sisters.
Ah, right. Okay.
But I don't think I would have directed that as well as I did, if not for the experience of both Sisters and Mustangs. Just because Mustangs was so, even though it was fully financed, for the quality of the product SBS was expecting, it was very, very low budget.
Yeah.
And it put a lot of pressure on all the departments. And I think we got away with it purely through the experience I had of knowing how to quickly problem solve.
Was there a big difference stepping off Mustangs onto Sisters? Did you notice a change aside from the people that you were answering to?
Yeah, I mean, the budget level was a huge difference in that, one was a half-hour kids show into a primetime commercial network show. I could tell by the, something as simple as the catering or the access of certain equipment and just little things like that I realized I was getting really spoiled on when I stepped onto the Homecoming Queen set, in that it was suddenly like, it was basically like a student shoot. And I was down to one camera and I had to move my own split, and it was fine because I, having done the China thing, I was like, yeah, I'm cool sound recording and directing at the same time. But, it was just, it was basically within the space of a month, the two sets. And I suddenly went, oh, okay, we're here again. Cool. Cool. I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what got me through it was the fact that I really felt like I had fostered this project from the get-go, and I was, insanely protective over it.
Did you have moments of that same sort of anxiety again when you went on to Sisters that you'd had initially, because it was perhaps more pressure?
Yeah, it was, I think slightly, it was very different actually, because, every set has its own chemistry, and I was doing the last block on Sisters, so everyone was very set in their ways, and also a lot of them had worked together on Offspring as well for years, so I was like, not only was I the new kid, but this was like the last term of high school, and I was just like, hello, I'm gonna be school captain now and tell you what's what. But that crew was insanely skilled and professional, and there were quite a few times where I was like, oh, okay, this is how a script supervisor can make my directing better, or oh, this is what a brilliant first AD can do for me. It was just, little things that, I can take into my feature and kind of know why I'm fighting for certain things. And that was what I've always wanted from television.
So you feel like this is, as opposed to it being the space where you'd like to live, this is really a continuation of your education as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I definitely think so. The way content's moving, TV and film, like what are the differences? I look at my own viewing habits, and I'm mostly watching television as well. For me, the difference is it's episodic or it's one-off, rather than film and TV. And the dream will always be to make a feature film, because that was why I wanted to do directing in the first place, and that'll always remain first prize. But realistically, if I think about how I'll sustain my voice in the future, I can't help but feel it'll be in the episodic realm.
Yeah, and I guess it's a good way to keep... So much of creativity is about keeping your tools sharp, and I could imagine that the way that TV is turned around in Australia on network TV really requires you to be sort of top of your game, have everything really sharp, and being making decisions very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And with all the streaming platforms, the barriers, the content is becoming so globalized, and so is talent, in front and behind the camera, and more so than ever, making a show it feels less like this is an Australian show, or it's easier to plan things for beyond the borders of this country, and I think that'll really only make content better.
I read an interesting quote of yours that spoke about, going back to diversity, spoke about if one was to make a film about people from Taiwan, that the core crew should reflect the story that's being told, as opposed to it being just what's being put in front of the screen as diversity.
Yes.
And then everyone behind the camera is still
white, yeah.
middle class or upper, working class, whatever. And I was quite sort of intrigued by that point, because I guess it goes back to you being a poster child and that kind of narrative being taken out of your control. And I'd be interested to hear kind of your thoughts on if you feel like that's being changed as well, or that's sort of steps behind because that's not what's front and center in the public's eye.
It's something that I've said before, that I'm not interested in the false kind of diversity where storytellers hide behind blind casting, quotation marks, and just sort of slap into a show some people of color and let that be that. I mean, not to take away from the positives of blind casting, but yeah, I think it lures us into a false sense of, okay, cool, this is, we're seeing characters represented properly, because it's not authentic to me. I see it and it fills me with a rage. And, I think what the future of Australian content I'm interested in is where creators from different cultures or different genders and different sexualities are in control of images of themselves, and it's not coming from it's where the minority are allowed to tell stories about themselves for the majority to understand. Because so far in history, it has been the other way around.
Yeah, and I think that these sort of stories are universal. It shouldn't be necessarily that we're looking at stories in such a kind of superficial way. It's what's the message of the story, what's the emotionality or the kind of the experience of the story, as opposed to literally like this is A and this is B.
Yeah, I think so, but I guess my my main point is that when you're empowering, say, people of color to tell that story, it stops being an interpretation of what a Caucasian person might imagine to be the truth. It's a better reflection of that story, and I think that's my my main issue with what happens in Australia specifically. If you look at in the US with people like Shonda Rhimes and how she staffs her rooms, in Australia, Indigenous storytelling is really ripe, and I think that's because there's an investment that's been made into protecting their voice, and I wish that that could happen for other cultures. For example, Asian Australians have been here since the gold rush, and I can name on one hand the amount of screen content that has been made here about that experience. which isn't good enough.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
How for you, as we sort of started this conversation talking about this paradigm shift, but kind of going through the usual kind of filmmaker angst of having the 5 or 6 years in the wilderness, how have you felt you've managed to stay the course through all that and kind of just scratch and claw until finally you actually had your 2017 breakout year?
Well, I think about quitting a lot. I'm pretty sure I thought about quitting once a year. And then at one point I did quit for a month. Like I gave up completely in 2014. And looked on Seek and, thought about applying for proper office jobs and stuff. And then I realized I was trained in nothing and had no skills other than in directing. So that kind of got me back on track. And I just thought, I just have to keep making a go of it. Yeah, and like I have been really privileged in that along the way, basically every year something little will happen, like I'll get, a little film grant or an attachment or so forth to just really keep me going. And I think you really have to hold on to that because it's very easy for either voices inside your own head or family or whatever to take that away. Yeah, I have emails from people that I sometimes look at that reminds me that it's okay and it's worth it. But yeah, it takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of being alone in the wilderness. I
think sacrifice is the kind of big one that I've been sort of reflecting on a lot myself over the last sort of 10 or so years since I finished film school. And not even necessarily consciously going, in the moment, I didn't consciously go, I'm going to sacrifice this, but just simply not being able to do certain things or having to kind of forego certain things that other friends might be doing or family might be doing because I was pursuing this creative life.
Yeah, no, I've definitely lost some friendships and relationships along the way. And you just miss, like I've missed weddings. That's
kind of specifically what I was thinking of, certain weddings and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to go and have a wedding in Bali. I'm like, I can't afford several $1,000s to come to your wedding. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Like I just felt like I spent all of my 20s on the poverty line and just can't do certain things when your friends are buying houses and stuff. It's funny now that because now they're deep in their mortgages and I suddenly feel like I have disposable income, that the pendulum has really swung back and I'm like, let's go to this fancy restaurant for dinner. And they're all like, oh no, I've got my mortgage.
Yeah, 2.5 kids.
Yeah. So it's weirdly frustrating because it's like, oh, our lifestyles are never going to match up. But yeah, the sacrifice thing is something that I don't think I never thought about or realized when I was younger. And I don't think young filmmakers realize now. And it's something that I'm trying to bring up in talks. In talks and stuff. How much that you'll disappoint the loved ones in your life because of your career choices.
Yeah, the chorus at my family events was, is this job paying you?
Yeah.
Which I'm sure most creatives could relate to.
Yeah, totally. And my parents stopped caring about any nominations. Or I remember I was nominated for the actors and my mom was like, oh, does that come with prize money? And I went, no, I actually have to pay a bit of money to go. Yeah. And she was like, I don't care. don't talk to us until there's money involved.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's perhaps a generational thing as well, because our parents' generation, particularly if they're migrants, would be so kind of industrial in their mindset of, work equals money equals security, or whatever the, equation is.
Yeah.
That when they see their kids who they have openly, or perhaps not openly, but who they've nurtured and encouraged to kind of be free thinking or liberal in the way that they want to pursue their life, suddenly not having that security, I could imagine would be quite challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that I've made peace with now because I understand where they're coming from, in that like all they want is for me to be safe because they've chosen a life where they've put me in an unsafe environment by uprooting and leaving their homeland. So for me to then make a choice that will threaten that paradigm, it would be terrifying to them. And for my parents, their religion is money. So
yeah.
I'm definitely in a space where I'm challenging that every day.
Yeah, you're denouncing their god.
Yeah.
What's your feature about?
It's set in China. There are all these fully built but empty cities that the media refer to as ghost cities for various reasons. People have never moved in, even though they're designed to be like cities of the future. So it's about a biracial Australian woman who tracks her long-absent father down in one of these cities and goes there not knowing that it's completely desolate. And so her search for her father is also her search for her own cultural identity.
Right.
Yeah.
And how long have you been working on this one for now?
A couple of years. We're on the third draft now and close to confirming our producer. So it's kind of at the time where, well, I should know within the next year if this is going to be a real thing that's going to go ahead.
Are you working with Michelle on this one as well?
No, I'm working with a writer called Penelope Chai.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is it strange? Have you collaborated with her before?
No, it was we met at a film function or a networking event and sort of got to talking. This was an idea that has existed in my mind as like a one-liner for a really long time, and I just couldn't quite crack it. And I mentioned it a couple of years ago to her, and we got to talking, and I just thought, oh, this would be a great collaborator for this story. And we got some development money that allowed us to go to one of these cities and started writing there. And here we are.
And that was just before you got the gig on Mustangs, right?
Yeah. So it was a very, very strange thing when it was just one thing after another. And
has it slowed down for you now, or is it still?
No, it's very constant, which I'm grateful for. But I had a slight, I don't want to say nervous breakdown, but it was definitely a panic something at the start of the year. And, I just couldn't get control over my anxiety. It just felt like it was constant, and my heart rate was like out of control, and I had to do one of those gross Bali retreats that I imagine white women do all the time. And
especially after they just get divorced.
Yeah. So I had a eat, pray, love experience.
Yeah.
No.
You just did the pray part.
Yeah. I just went to Bali and did some yoga and meditated and stuff, which really helped. So, because I was starting to get into that slump where I'm like, oh, I don't want to work anymore. Like, I don't want to, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
But I just realized I needed a holiday. I think it's hard to remember that when your work is so tied up in your passion, and also when you're younger and you don't have children, to just realize when enough is enough and to slow down. So I definitely experienced that.
Yeah, and I think also the hours that film or TV, that world kind of demands of you when you are in the flow of just working on a job. You know, it's like there's no real time for anything else.
Yeah,
that's your life.
Yeah, totally. And even when you're not on set or not at your computer tapping, your mind's still churning away as well.
Yeah. Did you find that having this feature or your own creative projects would ground you when you were, working on these TV shows?
The for hire shows, yeah, definitely. The dream in my mind was always like half a year for hire and half a year working on my own stuff. And so far, for the past year and a half or so, it's definitely worked out. So I've spent, I'm kind of in the next 2 months being able to write and focus on a variety of my own projects. And then in June, I start again on a TV show. So, yeah, to dip in and out is the best way, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like a good dream.
Yeah.
I like that dream.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that dream.
Yeah. Do it. It's great. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
You won't ever see your friends, but it's great.
Right. I don't have any friends anyway, so that's why I do this podcast, so I can have human contact. Thank you for chatting with me, Corrie. If anyone wants to see your short films aside from your first sci-fi short, they can see them on corriechen.com.
That's right.
And if they want to reach out to you about doing their podcast, apparently you can just do that on Twitter.
Yeah, very easy. I'm very easily accessible because I don't do anything other than sit at my computer. So anytime.
Well, I'm glad to have gotten you up from your computer. I finish all of the podcasts with the same question, which is what makes you silly?
What makes me silly?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I really like going to arcades. So I have a particular addiction to claw machines.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's probably a gambling addiction, but I do often spend $50 plus to try and take home some plushies.
Right.
Yeah.
I used to have that as well, actually.
Yeah.
I used to work at the Jam Factory as a projectionist back when 35mm was a thing.
Yeah.
And they had like these two skill testers like at the bottom of the stairs. So every time I would leave work or go to work, I would have to go past them. And some of my wage would go into them.
Yeah, like it's such a addiction. Like even talking about it now, my heart rate's starting to pick up. Like the thrill of when the claw goes down and you think you're going home with a plushie, but then it just slips out. Yeah, that's a dichotomy of emotions right there.
Thank you so much, Corrie.
Thank you.